thinking about that dream reparation fund, almost 190 years, and wondering if we can ever get it? Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Andy Ingraham got to say about emancipating one's mind to become a rainmaker and get your own bag.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome 242 to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. Join our co-sponsors Dom Dev Enterprises and Page Investments and our friends at Something to Think About in this discussion this evening with our good comrade and friend, mentor, thinkable person, make it, just moves all the mountains out the way and makes a path for success. We will have this awesome discussion with Mr. Andy Ingraham. If producer, you can add him to the show for us, please, so that we can have a talk. What happened? Cool. Oh, I need to do that. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah. Okay. Welcome, Andy. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I saw the book, Long Walk to Freedom.
Yes.
That's the journey that I'm on.
Yeah. I can't tell you I read the whole thing, but I only read like pieces, like sometimes a sentence, sometimes a whole chapter, and then I keep moving. And when it hit me, I hit back another book. But I got to get into the habit that you have. That's how I got you on the show now, because I want to learn how to be this rainmaker. Because there got to be hope for people like me and everybody else out there in the 242. We can't just be sitting in the same spot forever, waiting on somebody else.
Well, you're right. And my grandmother and my grandfather, who lived in West Street, always taught me one thing, and that is movement is perpetual and education is important to help your journey. And so my grandparents had a small store in West Street. I remember as a young boy helping them to serve customers. Mm-hmm. And what I learned in that exercise was the relationship and the people skills that both my grandfather and my grandmother had in dealing with their customers. And I think lifelong journey is about developing the same skills with people that I've taken from them and used in my journey to whatever mode of success I've had.
Awesome. And that's some good nuggets right there, people. You got it up front. You didn't have to wait to get down into the show to get some things, know what it takes to move on and stuff like that. So this good gentleman in front of us who, has a Santa Claus beard, trim off a little bit. But yeah, we like to see that big bright smile you got. He was born in Nassau in the Bahamas, but he lives in Fort Lauderdale. So, I always say that these are these hybrids. People taking advantage of the tools and so forth. But he's the founder and present president and CEO of the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers, Inc. Now, how you pronounce the abbreviation for that? So I could say it right.
NABHOOD.
Okay, right. Awesome. He's also focused on the tourism industry, developing specific and expertise in the African American, multicultural, and Caribbean tourism markets. He has many clients around the world, from Vibe Music Conference to FUBU to Impact and Revolt Music Conference. Appointed to the National Tourism Advisory Committee for the NAACP. And also the White House. Boy, you some big shots, White House, found to the White House for tourism, and is the founder and host of the annual International African American Hotel Owners and Multicultural Tourism Summit and Trade Show. Yeah, that's someplace I think I need to go. But We need not go through all of the 50,000 things that he has on his resume. My people, literally, you could find it on Facebook or YouTube. Just click on the link for the show, the details in the description, and just find it in there. But what I identify the most with this good gentleman is I don't know if he held on to the boat like me, but he didn't have on his resume any of these highfalutin tier one type schools. You know, most people who are highly successful that we see in the 242 went to this school or that school and university, etc. And you know, some of them throw those things around to box you up a little bit. But you know, I like Andy because he's down to earth. You know, he just hits you at the ground level. And so I could identify with that being low level myself from that perspective. But you know, these things are things would be considered the ABCs of leadership, hitting the ground and getting down with the people. So welcome, 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 Andy.
Thank you very much. Listen, I attended Woodcock's Primary as well as Oaksfield Junior with Miss Ganner. Oaksfield. So those are very formative years. And I think, as I tell people, my badge of courage was individuals and teachers that had a commitment to my success. School today are very different. I had an opportunity for my parents to ship me off to boarding school in Jamaica, where I really became an adult prior to coming to the U.S. to attend college. But, you know, I think what I think is important is that you mentioned all those things that we've done, but there are many, many successful Bahamians, both at home and abroad. You know, my first option after completing school was to come home, but there were really very few opportunities at that time. And we saw, or I did, I remember calling my brother and I said, man, you have to come to the U.S. You know, one correction, I'm actually from Tarpon Bay, Eleuthera. I'm very proud of that. I spent some very good years in Tarpon Bay. I have many relatives still there, as I do in Nassau. I speak to my aunt very often. As a matter of fact, she called me this morning. But I think for us, we have an incredible amount of talent. I think it's underutilized. We have a great country. I was on a board meeting yesterday and we were talking about the Bahamas and how we can help the healthcare system. And, you know, during Hurricane Dorian, I worked that through the Bahamas diaspora. And Bahamians, no matter where we are, have a commitment to do what we would have done if we were home, and that is to help with nation building. Doesn't matter where I am, who I work for. I've worked for the Dutch, I've worked for the French, I've worked for Anguilla, the British, as you would call them. I've worked for the Americans. But at the end of the day, when I have my jacket on, I wear that Bahamian flag that I'm so proud of, because part of what I am is what in 1973, when we became independent, and clearly understanding the role that whatever obstacle that one put in front of me, it was there for me to push away and continue along that journey.
Awesome. Well, you know, William H. Johnson, S-E-N, is the foremost African American artist, and he's credited as saying, if it is going to be, it is up to me. And you being this established, esteemed rainmaker in my books, tell us, what is Nahab? Did I pronounce it?
Nabhood.
Nabhood. And why Nabhood?
That's a good question, and I remember when I came up with the idea and talked to a couple of friends, it was a very simple equation for me. Having grown up in the Bahamas, all my friends had great jobs at the hotels. They had cars. They had better bicycles than I did. And my mother would never allow me to work in the hotels. So I just couldn't figure it out. And when I went off to boarding school, she had a plan. So when I became an adult, um, during my time and working in the industry, started off as a consultant in the tourism industry. I went to work for the Dutch in St. Martin. I ended up in Guadeloupe, Anguilla. Um, and I figured out that at that time, African Americans back in the early 90s, late 90s, African Americans were spending about $30 billion annually on travel. And I thought, why can't we get more of that money in our communities, in our businesses, than just a good time of going to a convention? If you go to any hotel during the height of a convention, as we did 2 weeks ago, where we had over 500 hotel owners and industry people, including Mrs. Sheila Johnson, the owner of Salamander that used to own BET, to Stanley Campbell, the the Bahamian that owns a golf course in Florida, and his wife, who's the second highest ranking African American in the Biden administration, or to Warren Thompson, that owns the largest minority food service company in the U.S. I created this organization because I saw a need that people of color, specifically Black people, did not own any assets in the tourism industry. And it's unfortunate that happens, whether it's in the Bahamas or the U.S., but we own zero assets. In 2001, when I came up with the name and the concept, I said to a couple of friends, let's do it. And lo and behold, as my good friend Don Peoples, who spoke on Friday at the convention, when he became the first African American to build a hotel on South Beach, the 433 room at a cost of $62 million, the Royal Palm. As a result, it wasn't easy. It came about as a result of protests, tourism boycott. And I tell people, hard work is hard work. You have to soldier on in spite of the obstacles. Nobody's going to give you anything. You've got to be smart enough to understand that if I move forward motion is something that's going to help me to my goal. So when we created NABHOOD, I had a basic desire, that is to own hotels. Today, we own over 2,500 hotels around the United States and some of the Caribbean islands. I pulled together a group of individuals who have been successful in previous businesses. I have a young Haitian partner out of Washington, D.C. Came to this, well, his mother came to this country. He was born here. He came to us a couple of years ago, had a couple of bucks, and we said, hey, why not invest in a hotel? Today, his first hotel was a small Holiday Inn Express. Today, he owns the Westin at the Baltimore International Airport and a number of hotels in the D.C. So when we looked at what we started doing and where we're going, and I projected the next 10 years, the next 5 years, we will have more than 500 additional hotels to add to our collection. And in 15 years, 10 to 15 years, African Americans will be the largest owner of hotel rooms in this country. There's 68,000 hotels in the United States. My partners, the Asian American hotel owners, own about 62% of them. We followed in their footsteps. They're great partners. But as investors, we tend to look at the opportunity and to continue. I'm also very lucky. You mentioned FUBU and Revolt and Mr. Combs. You know, back in the early 2000 and 1999, I was lucky to get a major contract with FUBU, given to me by my good friend today, who I still talk to, Damon John and Keith Clinkscale, is to develop a concept. At that time, I was a consultant for the beautiful country of Dutch St. Martin.
Mm.
And I created an event there back in 2000, which also the foray, I had to rent a hotel, and I said, this hotel is not as expensive as I thought, so I might as well buy it. But today, um, most of the guys that I started back years ago, whether it's Keith Klingscale or Will Packer, um, we're currently looking at opportunities. And as a result of our summit 2 weeks ago, we're now contemplating on a substantial investment in the Bahamas that I think is going to make Bahamians proud because of the Bahamian ownership. It is going to make Bahamians proud because of our social commitment. It's going to make Bahamians proud because it's not going to just stop with one. And as most people that know me, when we dig our heels in, we work. Whether it's whether it's NAPUD or whether it's the Bahamian diaspora, whether it's Dorian, and we have a bunch of good people. I have a great team. I have two of my sons that work for me and one of my daughters. I'm not an easy person, I've been told, to work for, but we demand the best because we're quite capable. You talk about emancipation, and we've got to first emancipate ourselves in our minds. And
Yeah, but before you go to that one, though, because we come into that right next. You answered about 4 or 5 of my questions already, what you said. But I want you to help the public understand the impact of NAPUD that has had on the region and the 2 countries in particular, the Bahamas and the United States.
well, it's beyond. It's Turks and Caicos. It's Jamaica. Back in 2019. Well, let me just regress. Every president, just about, of every major hotel brand has either attended or spoke at NAPUD, whether it's the president of Wyndham, the president of Hyatt, the president of Choice, because they think it's that important. And the people that we bring together are the ones that are capable of helping them to grow.
Right.
For us, NABHOOD, and I think about this very often, whether I'm speaking in New York at the NYU show at the Wall Street Journal, everybody knows the word NABHOOD. And typically, we're unapologetic about it because it is for the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers. But part of that is the commitment of my organization and myself to create a new generation of diverse leaders. Every year, we sponsor about 40 kids from HBCUs around the country, including the University of the Bahamas. Dr. Ruth Gardner brings her students in, and I sponsor about 4 kids every year. And I want them to see success in motion. I want them to see something that they can emulate and then imitate. So for us, as I've been told, whether you're in Fort Lauderdale, whether you're in Washington, D.C., where the largest hotel in Washington, D.C. is owned by a Bahamian woman and an American husband. It's an 1,175 room Marriott Marquis built at a cost at $545 million. The Trump Hotel in D.C., formerly the Trump Hotel, is now the Waldorf Astoria, owned by a Jamaican member of ours right here in Miami. And in fact, in 2019, we sat down and hatched a deal to raise over $650 million by partnering with Hilton Hotel and, more importantly, its chief executive, Chris Nassetta, to say, let's do this deal together. And by the way, Chris Nassetta also owns a house in the Bahamas. So a lot of the people that we work with, we're so thrilled because they have connections with the Bahamas and connections with many other Caribbean countries.
Yeah. So we're talking about this emancipation, as you mentioned, and emancipation of our mind, so we become the rainmakers, so we could achieve our own bag, as we call it. That's slang talk for young people. But this epiphany, to know that not to sit around and wait and for other people and be constrained to their movements and their appetite and their speed, the pace, etc. Paved the way for you to do your goals. So, when did this emancipation of your mind happen? When you mentioned earlier about when with your mom, but when did it all become that you could actually do this yourself? When did you get that picture?
Sitting in boarding school, when I first got there, I cried for about 2 or 3 weeks. I thought my parents, particularly my mom, had abandoned me. But I realized that she had a plan. And I also realized that I can take advantage of my new surroundings, new friends. Today, my friends are all over the world, whether they're in Vietnam or Bermuda. And we all have some connection. As a matter of fact, Washington Missick went to boarding school with me. He's now the premier of the Turks and Caicos. So for me, the emancipation was sitting on the hill in Jamaica with guys like Keith Major and Anthony Roach and George Arnaco, and looking at cars passing by. And we used to play this game. If a red car passed, it was my. If a blue car passed, it was Keith Major's car. And so, because the nurturing and the commitment of the instructors and teachers, and a guy named Dean Ruggles, who many of us were not only afraid of, but we knew that he had our best interest in spite of the fact of us being bad boys. They really set the foundation for the things I do today. And when I look back, and I had an opportunity to now contribute to my university, we're currently building a 300-acre solar farm in conjunction with the university. Both Washi and I have a tremendous scholarship program going there. I had the president of the university as my guest this past 2 weeks ago. We're contributing computers and financial support to young people. Because to me, you mentioned when that emancipation. A few years ago, I was walking through CV Bethel High School with the Minister of Tourism and the principal. And the principal said, "Andy, meet this young man." And I said, stopped, said hello. And I asked him a couple of questions. And he said, well, I was told that he was a bright kid. He was actually the head boy. And then the principal mentioned to me, he was at school today as a volunteer and didn't have to be there. When I think about it, I didn't want to go to school when I had to go. And so I asked this young man, what did he plan to do? Because it was his final year. And he said he hoped to study aviation. He was not sure. His parents wasn't in a position to help him go off to school. So I turned to my assistant and I said, let's get this gentleman in one of our programs. 6 weeks later, he was on a conference call with the university president. We just invited him back. We flew him in from Nassau 2 weeks ago to help out at our summit. He's now in his third year of aviation that we sponsored. And when I looked at that kid at CV Bethel coming out of high school, I saw something similar to what people saw in me. And all they needed was an opportunity. So I think for us, reaching out, reaching back, that principal at CV Bethel saw something that I just was happy to hop onto and say, let me help him push him a bit further. So for me, education has always been the foundation and has helped me where I am today.
Awesome. So when we talk about emancipation, there's normally associated with that the freeing of something. And so I normally say it's shackles of the mind, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's but something in the mind is telling people that they can't do. What are some of the things that you experience along the way that people would need to focus on getting rid of out of the mind that is holding them back?
There's a song that Bob Marley says, "Free yourself from
Mental slavery.
mental slavery," and that's the key. People will always tell you what you can't do. In the United States, unfortunately, there's this issue of racial discrimination. Having lived and born and raised in the Bahamas, having had a strong father and mother, we were told there's nothing we couldn't do. And even when I created Napa, they told me the name was wrong using the word black. So I think developing mental toughness, where you see that the road ahead is the path that you have to take, and you've got to be strong enough to trust the training, the judgment, that if it's bad wherever I am, and if I stay here, if I do nothing, nothing will change.
Will change.
If I decide to pursue whatever job, whatever relationship, whatever position you want to attach yourself to, whatever friends, and listen, I think it's critical. You've got to find the right people to associate with. If you want to rob cars and create mischief, it's very easy. I was so afraid of my mother that the things that I wanted to do, if I was going to try it, I knew that when I got home, she would not only give me a whipping, then she would tell my father to give me another whipping. And I told somebody a few days ago, if we lived in the United States, both of my parents would be in jail, because in today's market, you can't even seem to touch your kids because they call the police. Matter of fact, when they called the police in the Bahamas, the police then give you a third whooping.
Yeah. But they used to send you to the tree to get the switch.
Oh yeah, go get the switch and bring it back. And like my grandmother would say, then we would chastise you. So listen, I think for us, and I said this, I had an opportunity to spend a couple of hours with our Prime Minister, Prime Minister Davis, this week, 2 weeks ago, when he spoke at our diaspora event, and we had a number of investors that spent some time with him. But I remember one of my investors having a concern, and I said, ask the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister responded and said, the Bahamas is committed to providing opportunities where we have Bahamians involved. They're more or equally committed. And that investor was so thrilled with an opportunity to spend time with the Prime Minister, because people always seem to be aloof.
Right.
But when you look at Mr. Davis, one of the true leaders in the Bahamas, what you see is people and vision that he can articulate that you want to be a part of. And I know when our investors came into the room before he spoke and after he spoke, and my subsequent conversation, they felt comfortable. And so when you talk about emancipation, it is people like him that help make the journey a reality and easy. There are many leaders. I didn't know Lyndon Oscar Pinland personally, but I knew that the impact and what he did had a profound impact in changing my life and the life of siblings and what we do today.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you said that right then, because, the next part of this conversation is to talk about a little bit about our 50 years of independence and how, things like people like you would have made a difference. And so if you look at the leaders and the persons who sat as prime ministers, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. or one is sitting now. So his tenure isn't finished yet. So I don't know if it's fair to speak of his tenure. But so Lyndon was there for 25 years total, but 19 as an independent country in the independent country, and Hubert Alexander Ingram and Perry Glasson Christie were there for 25 years. And then Hubert Alexander Menace was there for 4 years or 4.5 years, whatever time it is. So I only say that to say this, that each of those groupings had a different mindset or mentality. One took us from a majority rule into independence and so forth. And the country has gone, I shouldn't say gone in a certain way, because external forces help push the country in a certain way, but how you react to these forces is what makes a difference, and how you think and our attitude towards things, I think, makes the big difference. And so overwhelmingly, the majority of development on record has been under Mr. Pinland's tenure, which is interesting. Of 50 years, only 20 of it most development. So of all of these things, then we look at people like the Turks and Caicos Islands, who recently had a mindset shift. And I don't know if you had any involvement in working with them on any part of their whole rebranding and what have you and stuff like that. But they are on a huge upswing in terms of development. So I wondered, how do we remove these shackles that we have today so that we could maximize, because we have more potential than anybody else in this region, including Florida, in my opinion.
No, your opinion is the same as mine. I think we have a tremendous opportunity where I think we is failing to pull the trigger. Failing to bring the best minds, the best ideas, in spite of our political differences, in spite of how we feel with each other. You know, when I started my journey, I would go to events where you have 2, 3, 4,000 people, and typically I would be the only one, or maybe 5 or 6. We have a great conference in Los Angeles that I was the only African American on the board of directors. When I got appointed to the White House, I was the only person in South Florida appointed to the White House on tourism. Oh. And so I think for us, when you have so much that can be developed, let's think about the Bahamas for a second. The Bahamas is really a small Caribbean. Look at the islands that we have. We have vast opportunity to develop our aviation industry. We have vast opportunities to be the leaders. And by the way, years ago, we were considered the leaders in the industry. I have a good friend called Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Every time I go somewhere, the first question they ask me, do you know Vincent Vanderpool Wallace? He was a leader in the industry. And so where I think we have so much talent, we're just not utilizing it. One of the things I learned in our industry, I'm not an expert on building golf courses. I'm not an expert in making film. I'm an expert in hotel development and investment. And so when I'm looking to do something else, I put a team of people around me, whether it's financing, whether it's acquisition. What I think we fail to do a lot in most developing countries, we fail to assemble a team that may have different ideas. You know, I like working with my sons because my son is not afraid to say, Dad, or my daughter for that matter, that's not a good idea. Let's try this. And so I think we've got to begin to open the tent to everybody. We've got this tribal issue that we have only distract us from being what we can be. When I look at investment around the country, and every time I attend a meeting, I have a meeting next week in Tampa, people are interested in doing business in the Bahamas, and nobody's knocking on their door. Imagine if we had an effort where we proliferated like Turks and Caicos or Anguilla or Jamaica, where we're going out trying to find investors, people are coming to us. Now, in my opinion, I think we should be going to them,
Mm-hmm.
because I that gets the ear and the confidence of that investor and being able to deliver what they say that they can deliver, because all throughout the Caribbean, sun, sand, and sea. I had a big argument with the Minister of Tourism of Anguilla on Saturday. And I said, our beaches are better than your beaches. And he said, that's not true, Andy. We've got the
Mm-hmm.
best, same thing with Turks and Caicos. So we
Mm-hmm.
all have the same thing. How do we differentiate? And I think for us in the Bahamas, we've got to figure out how we can all be on the same page, how we can be that revolutionary thinking in developing marijuana, in developing Farmers Key, in developing Exuma, in developing my hometown of Eleuthera. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, and I tell people this, if you want to create a society where people are comfortable, give them a good paying job or an opportunity to create wealth. The Bahamas, if we're not very careful, will become a country of people that work for a living. You cannot will your job to your offspring. You can simply take generational wealth, and a number of Bahamians have done that. Linden did that with the Sunshine Boys. If you look at those families today, they went from where they were then to look at
Mm-hmm.
them today. How can we make more Bahamians in that same position? And a lot of us that you and I created the Bahamas think tank that you're a member of. Um, and we try to explore ideas to help um, where we can exchange ideas. We don't all have to agree,
Right.
uh, but
And we don't all agree.
we don't all agree. And sometimes it becomes so disagreeable. That's
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate. But um, I think today, if I look at where we are today, we have a great opportunity to do a mind shift, to
Mm-hmm.
change. We've got to get Freeport up and running. We've got to
Right.
get the Family Islands with more opportunities. We've got to get crime down. All these issues that we have, these are great opportunities to change the course in the lives of Bahamians.
Awesome. But folks, you're welcome to ask questions and give your comments, etc. Whilst we have this wealth of knowledge sitting in front of us and energy. Because don't mind they like I say Santa Claus, everybody thinks Santa Claus just sit down on the thing and go ho ho or somewhere in there put him around. This
I
guy got
need to say,
plenty energy and always moving and always thinking. Brain doesn't stop. You could fry eggs on his head if you want what. So Brooke Sherman here is saying Andy is a true inspiration to tourism and hospitality professionals like myself. His persistence and passion for ownership sets the bar for us all. Yes, thank you, Brooke, and welcome, welcome, welcome to something to think about. Hopefully, we'll see you much more, asking many more of these questions, and giving accolades to the persons you want to highlight, which is awesome. So, as
happy.
we go ahead.
Let me just add, there's so many people, Brooke, I know her as a student. I met her as a student when she came to our program. And all
Mm-hmm.
these young people need is an opportunity. There's Regina
Yes.
Smith, another student who's trying to develop a processing plant that
Mm-hmm.
I once said, go to the Ministry of Agriculture
Agriculture.
and see if you,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and see if you can find a way to develop what we call public-private partnerships. In the United States, we've done well with public-private partnerships, and with
Mm-hmm.
I make it a point, whether I'm working in Washington D.C. or Columbus, Ohio, is to meet with our elected officials and
Mm-hmm.
share with them the opportunity that if we're able to work in their jurisdiction, the impact that we would have. When I talk about Warren Thompson and his food service um, ability, if you think about it, if you came to Florida 3 years ago
Mm-hmm.
and went to Fort Lauderdale, you would not find a Black-owned fine dining restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. Today, Warren has 7 fine dining restaurants on Las
Wow.
Olas, on US 1. And this is an
Mm-hmm.
African American that's part of the team that we put together.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for us, the inspiration to provide the group of Bahamians that are here, there's a guy named Ellie Hipper that
Yep.
lives between Freeport. When
Mm-hmm.
I talk to him, I'm encouraged. There's Roxy Roll. Um, there's Rosie Gomez, who heads up the National Association of the Bahamas. Um, and all of us have come together. And I can tell you, even when we had Hurricane Dorian, I was sitting in my living room watching television, worrying about relatives. And then 2 days later, I found myself landing in Abaco. And for the next months on end, we packed goods from our friends, we loaded airplanes, Tropic Ocean shut down the whole operation just so I can have hangar space just to help people. And when I think about it, I think of the opportunities that we have as Bahamians and the friends that we have here in the US and around the world, whether it's Congresswoman Frederica Wilson or
Right.
Joyce Baker or Maxine Waters. Um, we've got a lot of friends that we need to understand how to use our friendship. I have a saying, be a
Mm-hmm.
friend before you need a friend,
Right.
because a lot of us only call people when they need something.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's easy to say, if I have an ongoing relationship, I need some help. In the Bahamas, we've been out of an ambassador for almost 11 years. Every time I
Yeah.
have an opportunity to speak with Nicole Avant, or the current nominee for the Bahamas, or members in Washington, D.C., or senators, it is the same rule I have. The Bahamas have got to have uh, a new ambassador. I'm
Yeah.
afraid go into election, we're going to lose an opportunity. So we'll lose another 3 years without an ambassador if we don't get smart. The group
Yeah.
of people that I associate with, we're all on the same yoke. I think for
Mm-hmm.
us in the Bahamas, if you have contacts, talk to the friends that you have. Frankie Wilson, one of my heroes and mentors, Sir Frankie Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
um, has some great contacts and has given me great counsel. But we all want the same thing, and that is a better Bahamas, that young people can get the same thing that Sir Frankie had, Damian Gomez had, Andy Ingram's had, Perry Christie's had. There's no difference, because at the end of the day, you know, my learning experience is on the knees of my grandparents in West Street. And today, I still tell I have a 3-year-old grandson that I'm extremely proud of. And I say to him, you couldn't survive in West Street in the Bahamas during the time that
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So Andy, you just mentioned something that hit home, and then this question popped up, which lines right up. So you indicated that you sometimes when we need help, you go and ask these different people. To me, this is a shackle that we suffer from in the Bahamas, and I think throughout the whole Caribbean. We like to do things, and we want to say we did it ourselves as an individual, not the whole. And here, Stefan Grant is asking the question: um, who besides the development buying funds, Bahamian boutique hotel ownership, someone who doesn't have a jump start in the network? So he is asking the question, but there's many people who won't even ask for help. They don't even want nobody else in their business. They're gonna just try run a business by themselves, one person, maybe not even their family. How do we get over that hump? And about you answer this question from Grant.
Sure. I believe in teamwork. None of us individually have all the answers or all the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so the success of NABHOOD was built on one thing. If Stefan had an idea and some money, and John Smith had a similar idea and some money, we all came together because we all have a similar issue: lack of capital.
Mm-hmm.
So to articulate how we, in our case, whether it's partnering with a municipality, whether it's partnering with government, development bank, or some of the other agencies, the beauty about the United States is that they see the real value in creating jobs in areas where there's blight. If you look
Mm.
at Overtown or Fort Lauderdale, particularly Overtown, you would find that Overtown and the development of Overtown was chaperoned by three Bahamians.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Clarence Woods led that effort, and today, um, if you went into Overtown 10 years ago, and I know they hate for me to say this in Miami, you needed a police escort.
Mm-hmm.
Today you have Red Rooster, you have
Mm-hmm.
thriving condominiums, you have thriving developments. So government is important to jumpstart the industry. The other issue we have in the Bahamas and most of the Caribbean, we have unrealistic views of what investors should be doing. Um,
Mm.
I had a meeting recently, and the gentleman said, "I have some land. What's the value of the land? $2 million. But you need
Mm-hmm.
$20 million of my money, but you still want to be the leader. You have no experience. Sell me the land for $2 million or take a minority position."
Ownership. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can't expect to be unrealistic. And when you look at partners, you've got to understand the team concept and partner. What is it that you bring to the table?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, in most Caribbean countries, you don't have the sort of infrastructure that you have in the US and in most developed countries. But what you do have in the Bahamas is land. How do you, how does the government, how do you manage to convert ownership in land as equity in deals with
Right.
realistic approach? Just imagine, and I don't know the particulars of this, but when I look at some of the keys that these cruise lines had, just imagine if a Bahamian family owned that key and
Mm-hmm.
partnered with that cruise line, what would you have changed?
Right.
And so I like the idea is that we have the resources. Let's figure out how we can create ownership with Bahamians taking a lead or a piece of the action. Because let's face it, if I can make a little bit of money in my startup, by the time I get midway, I can increase the sort of returns I'm getting on my investment. You don't become rich in one day.
Right.
It is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And a lot of us need to understand that.
Yeah. So, and that goes big back to the scenario with Sir Lyndon's tenure, the 20 years, or rounded up to 20, of independence, and also the um, Ingram, Christie, and Menace tenure of 30 years. And the first Sir Lyndon those created more millionaires in that window of time than was created in the longer period of time after. And so, and I think that goes just towards commitment and vision, and not continuity of vision, and not just the hodgepodge 5 in and 5 out thing that we've been doing for the last couple of years that has disrupted a lot of things. But so, for people like us, Stefan, or others out there who want to get into this industry, your main focus has been in the like you said, hotel and hospitality section. We used to have what I would consider one of the productive and constructive training programs at the hotel training program there until it merged with the university college at the time. Will would create an incubator of sorts in the Bahamas for to help people understand the scope in that sector, because I think we all think that what you're all talking about is just going and becoming a busboy or waiter or a manager at the front desk or some. I don't think we understand the whole scope of the tourism and hospitality industry, and to help people understand what potential opportunities are there, and so how they could drive their minds to want to achieve some of these things.
You hit it right on the head. The answer is yes. We're currently working on a plan with a number of our stakeholders who have an interest in the Bahamas to really create and come up with a funding source. Right now, we were focused on education. One of our honorary consuls gave us $1 million that we've
Mm-hmm.
used in the agricultural sectors. So individuals that want to go to Florida A&M University, the Bill Picard and C.A. Smith Foundation funds would provide funding for them. We have a program in education at Florida Memorial College where we have a couple of $100,000 for scholarship kids, which Shaquille Rose is one of those young people. We
Okay.
have another fund that provide for young people that want to study climate change. That's the education component. But you're right. We spent some time trying to figure out how we can how we can buffer and create legitimate opportunities to invest. The current program I'm working on has a Bahamian investor, and I spent an hour with him this morning, and I said to him, "We are going to change your life. We're going to change your life because what you bring to the table is not something that um, uh, you would have had the government not had the vision to empower you, and by the government empowering that individual with land, that
Mm-hmm.
land is going to be an equitable part of the development that we're currently working on. So we've got to find ways, and every time I talk to Bahamians that have great ideas um, and the inability to get funding, it is something that have kept me awake at night. Um, I'm encouraging other Bahamians here in the diaspora to
Mm-hmm.
begin to look at opportunities to invest with our relatives, our friends, or just great ideas at home. Um, we put together a team at the Bahamas Diaspora that just do that. We're going to put up the funding. We're going to bring expertise to the table. We're going to partner. But again, people have got to have realistic approach, responsibility, and if you make a commitment, it is a hard commitment. I tell people, I used to do 1,000,000 miles a year. Um, Today, I'm lucky I don't have to do that, and I'm happy not if I don't have to. I like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
COVID has staying home for 3 years. Um, it's been a good thing for me because in 3 years my grandson was born, and I have a great time spending time with him. But
Mm-hmm.
what
Awesome.
I tell people that if I had to be in Atlanta or Washington D.C. at 9 o'clock in the morning for a meeting, I had to hop on a flight at 6 a.m. or at 7 a.m. in the morning. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do that and have the confidence of investors putting money with what we do or having people believe in our vision if I did not make the commitment
Right.
myself.
Yeah, the
So
effort. Mm-hmm.
when we talk to young people, I think we had 50 young people at our summit this year. And when I spoke to them and I had other leaders speak to them, we talk about work ethics and commitment. We talk about vision. And when people see that in yourself, as
Mm-hmm.
Celinda did in a number of individuals, then you can make a commitment to go forward. Now, I should tell you this, the world has changed since 1973 and before. And
Right.
so the fact that successive governments have made education available, you've got guys like Fred Papal,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sidney, Sidney McPhee. Sidney McPhee and I were in the drum and bugle corps together in uh, at St. Cecilia of Wolf Road and
Well, for
Collins
okay.
Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Today, he's a university professor. So, what successive governments have given us is the ability to not only to have a great education, but to dream. And in their mind, they may not have created financial millionaires, but they've created millionaires in terms of the impact that many of us in the diaspora that were born in the Bahamas and looking for opportunities to come back, or how we can be impactful with the resources that we have back at home.
Right. No, and somebody told me the other day that, it's one thing, yeah, you go and get your education and you prepare yourself with your experience and exposure. And those three things my grandmother used to call, say that's your education, right? When you get your academic experience and exposure. But, you know, Antoinette Russell was on the show one day, and she said in her synopsis that people can become this great athlete, etc., or professional, but they need mentors and they need cheerleaders. You know, partly I see you all doing both mentorship and cheerleading because you could open doors that would not have been opened before. And so, is that something that needs to be duplicated more in the Bahamas, or is that just in your sector?
No, no. It needs to be duplicated in the Bahamas in many different sectors and even more here in the US. You know, I tell people this all the time. As a young kid in Tarpon Bay, Lutheran, I remember going to the airport in Roxanne with my father, and I saw for the first time a person that looked like me getting off an airplane, a
Mm-hmm.
private aircraft, dressed in all white. At that time, I equated that with the eliteness of playing tennis. And I asked my father, I said, Dad, who is that man? And my father
Everyone
said,
knows it.
that's the gentleman that just got Cotton Bay to Frankie Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And so I emulated and always wanted to be like Sir Frankie Wilson. And when I had a chance to get his console, he has been more than willing to give that to me.
Mm-hmm.
We need more Sir Frankie Wilsons. We need more Happy Knowles. We need more Andy Gomez. Because at the end of the day, we all can help in developing the Bahamas to become a better nation than we found it. You know, I tell my wife all the time and my kids that we have a responsibility. And that responsibility is very simple. And that is to do all we can for as long as we can. And at the same time, by doing that, to help as many people as we can, because competition is fun. Competition is great. But when you can bring your friends and family members along for the ride, it's even a better experience than one would imagine. You know, I enjoy, coming home and spending time with Craig Pytham, who I went to school
Mm-hmm.
with in the U.S., or Rick Bowe, or Philip Mortimer, um, because these are friends. These are long childhood friends. I enjoy going to Curly's and sitting out in front and spending time with Curly. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy, I always tell the story about Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when he was at tourism, we weren't good friends, but I always admired him. And because I spent a lot of time studying African American and multicultural travel, and I'm always amazed that countries like the Bahamas and other Caribbean countries don't see that as a golden opportunity to embrace people that look like us.
Right.
African Americans spend $129.6 billion annually. And so when I talk to cities around the United States and I say to them, you're missing a market. We have a, a city called Kalamazoo, um, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And reading an article, and I saw that Kalamazoo, Michigan just won a grant to develop its multicultural market. Well, I quickly found out today's internet, the email of the president of Kalamazoo. I
Mm-hmm.
sent a note to her, and she responded and had a director of marketing talk to us. And now we're developing a program with them. And they came down to Florida to see how we did it,
Mm-hmm.
whether Turks and Caicos. Um, I'm a consultant in Belize. Belize is looking to see how they can develop not only the investment market, but how they can get people that look like you and I to come and invest there. I'm going
Right.
to lead a trade mission to Belize sometime later on this year. We have asked a number of our investors, let's go take a look at what the opportunities are. We're going to do the same thing in French St. Martin. Having worked for the Dutch government, I'm very familiar with that region. And there's always so many opportunities. In the US, you know, I'm a workaholic. So typically at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm still working the telephones
Mm-hmm.
because I work on multiple coasts. But it's also some good times when my phone doesn't ring that I can get work done because there's so much to be done
Right.
and there's so
Yes.
many opportunities. And the next leader could be an Akil Rose that I had an opportunity to meet walking
Mm-hmm.
through high school. Um, and today he's in his third year. Um,
Right.
I'm
Wow.
so proud of him and what he's doing.
Awesome. That's great stuff. And might take my hat off to y'all who have taken that time to move around the world and into the network and reach out, because sometimes people are afraid to just reach out. But when I watch you in motion, and Andy, your counterpart, I call him Gomez, who has helped me so much since I have left PTC in understanding many
Ambassador
many
Gomez.
things.
Ambassador
Unbounded.
Gomez.
Sorry, yes, sorry. Yeah, I gotta remember that, because when you grow up and so grow together, then you sometimes just forget that you have to give people their proper titles. Yes, and so I'm sure he can call me on that one too. Not out the right today, but at the right time, he's gonna make sure I remember that. This is awesome. But tell our people before I give you the opportunity to say one or two things. Tell our people what if you had 4 or 5 things that they must do in order to become rainmakers for themselves and create that bag for themselves. What are those 3 or 4 or 5 things that they ought to do in order to ensure that they get the best opportunity to achieve their goals?
Sure. Listen, develop some great relationships. Um, I've had the pleasure of going in many neighborhoods, whether I'm in the White House or whether at the Congressional Black Caucus, but develop some real meaningful relationships. Um, emulate Frankie Wilson, for example. When you look at what he does with U.S. elected officials, I just follow their lead. Also, develop good, ethical, hardworking commitment. Because always remember that hard work pays off. Don't let anybody tell you it does not. And also, the other thing I tell people, if you make a commitment to do something, do it. I remember Congressman L.C. Hastings, a good friend of mine before he passed away, came to the Bahamas, and he said, "Andy, are you in the Bahamas?" I said, "No, but I would be there." And I said, "When do you arrive?" And he said, "The next day." I booked a ticket. I flew there. I called Sir Frankie Wilson. I said, "Sir Frankie, I got Congressman Hastings in town. Can you make time to see him? And can you get the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Brave Davis, to meet with him?" And of course, we were there because the congressman wanted to meet with the charge um, at the U.S. Embassy. And I
Right.
sat through that meeting, and the charge was so grateful for that opportunity where they can tell the congressman what they needed and what the Bahamas needed in terms of resources from the U.S. Congress. And the final thing I always tell people, try to be well informed. Read as much as you can, look at current events, know what's going on in your environment, and then the most important thing is figure out real quickly how you can capitalize on a lot of the stuff. I read because I'm always looking for that next great opportunity. I may see something in what I read. Um, Take advantage of it. Don't be afraid. Fear is a paralyzing um, antidote that will keep you from succeeding. Um, my mother used to tell me many years ago when she got mad at me, she said, "I'm going to slap you from here to Timbuktu." When I went to work in Mali and spent some time in Bamako and Mopti and Timbuktu, I would always kid my mom, "Mom, I'm in Timbuktu today. You should have slapped me a long time. I would have made it here much quicker." So dream, never give up. Always dream, but when you dream, wake up and take action. Take action to make sure that dream becomes a reality.
Yeah, Jimmy V always say, "Don't ever give up. Whatever you do, don't give up."
Never give up.
Yeah,
It's going to be
yeah.
hard. If it's easy, we'll all be doing it. Um, but if you work hard, stick to the plan, stick to your plan, um, you're going to be a success.
Yeah, and I always say, if God ordained it, it's simple, but it ain't be easy. So that's one thing. So
I was supposed to be a priest. You know that. My mother,
what? I don't believe that.
My mother said I had two options: be a priest or be a lawyer.
Oh,
And
gee.
I said, I followed Father Martian Peters. I was baptized in Our Lady's, and my
Mm-hmm.
family is one of the founding families at Holy Family. And I always admired being an altar boy. I always admired Father Martian Peters, and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
emulate him. Then I figured out, well, I
Powerful
can't
man.
have a wife,
Mm-hmm.
so that was not going to work.
That's why I said what? But anyway, yeah, cool. So, Andy, I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to say to the public?
Um, I think you've done a great job, and I'm honored to you invited me to come on your program. Listen, I think for us in the diaspora, our commitment is really to see how we can be an asset to the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always tell people, let's not wait for it to happen. Let's make it happen. And you talked about, how we develop resources. I've said
Mm-hmm.
to our team, let's look for that opportunity. Let's look for the next group that we can invest with. And that's something that we're committed to do. The other thing, just as we did with Hurricane Dorian, there will be another hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Shudder to think about it. If you imagine Freeport and Abaco was destroyed, I spent countless nights hoping that we never have that same hurricane again. We never have the opportunity for a hurricane to shut down Nassau, Freeport, and Abaco
Mm-hmm.
because we're going to be stuck. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell our team here, whether it's Rosie Gomez at the National Association of the Bahamas or Dr. Pinkley at the Curtis Foundation, who we partnered with this past weekend to create our second annual Diaspora Summit. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that next year we'll be able to have that same summit in the Bahamas. Vincent Vanderpool and I are working on the first annual Caribbean Aviation Summit in October
Mm-hmm.
in Nassau, where we're going to have some discussions on overflight fees, on developing seaplane, developing aviation schools, getting more of our young people involved in aviations, because the Bahamas, with all its water, aviation is the number
Yeah.
one industry. It's not just being a pilot, it's air traffic control, it's safety. And I had a chance to spend last Monday with the Director General of Civil Aviation, Mr. Ferguson, and
Mm-hmm.
talk about some of the visions that we have along with Tropic Ocean and all the partners that we have that support and work with the Bahamas. We're fairly lucky. Vincent Vanderpool and I always say that we have a good friend in St. Lucia. And every night he goes to bed and he asks God to move St. Lucia where the Bahamas is and move the Bahamas where St. Lucia is, because
Mm-hmm.
we're in a great position. We just don't know how to take advantage of
Of
the
it. Mm-hmm.
opportunity of proximity.
Mm-hmm.
And as Gilbert Morris says, proximity is key, but don't get choked up with being famous because of proximity. So
Yeah.
that's all I have to say. I mean, I'm here. If you have a question, you can go to our website, which is www.nabhood.com.
Mm-hmm.
Our next upcoming event, we're doing a workshop at the Congressional Black Caucus, um, September 23rd at 11 a.m. in the morning. And it's going to be held at an African American owned hotel, the Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn, right behind the beautiful marquee. And we'll have a lot of our folks there to talk about hotel ownership, multicultural tourism, and how to cash in on the growing industry of heritage tourism.
But seeing that you mentioned that, I'm waiting for you all to buy the Hilton. Trust me, I think that should be Bahamian, at least indigenous of
Well,
sorts.
more hotels should be Bahamian, but that's a whole different story I could tell you. But I don't want to get
Mm-hmm.
in trouble.
No,
But
no,
you're
no, no. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm just talking about figuratively. Though we need a cornerstone that we could see people of ourselves owning and operating, where we could see it, not just hear about it in the Bahamas. I mean, I know you have a lot of it in the United States, etc., and around the Caribbean, but some people don't know, and so I'm grateful that you came on so we could talk about this. and help people understand that we could be more than what we see every day, right? And you are a testament to somebody who have gone and created your own sector, I call it. I mean, it might have been there already, but you fine-tuned it towards you, to suit your skills and talents, etc. And you mastered it, and you bring people along with you, which is a part of the ABCs of leadership that I talk about. So we thank you for being you. You don't have the AT in front of your name, but we know you're in the bracket anyhow. So you are doing what it is. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Listen, I can make one solid commitment. The current development that we're working on, you and every Bahamian is going to be so proud of that development. It's going to rival any other development that you see in the Bahamas. But the difference is it will be majority owned of people that look like you and I and some Bahamians. You know, Frankie
Sounds
Wilson.
good to me.
Frankie Wilson is leading the effort with his development in Eleuthera, Jack's Bay. We just want to follow him and emulate him, but we're currently spending a lot of time negotiating and acquiring and developing our little piece of paradise that my partners and I are so happy, and we're so grateful to the Prime Minister of the Bahamas for understanding our vision, seeing our vision, and helping us to make our vision a reality. So again, thank you for this opportunity. And anytime you need me, Happy, you know how to find me. I'm always there. And thanks for being a good friend, and thanks for being a great contributor to the Bahamas think tank.
Thank you all. And you, excuse me. And everybody out there on social media, those who asked questions, Ms. Brooke, and thank you, Coin, you for joining the Something to Think About family, the community. Madam Producer, I know you've been quiet in the background, but because you just had a star on the show, so we didn't have to do much but just listen. So thank you all.
Congratulations on having a woman producer. That's always great. My
Boy,
daughter
let me tell you.
tells me we have to get more women in the field. And let me just say another thing about Brooke. We owe Brooke a debt of gratitude. She's been one of those students that came to us, a former Miss Bahamas candidate, went to work for Bahama, went to work for Hyatt, and both her husband, Stefan, I want to say just hello to them. And what a great job. One closing point. There's a gentleman called Hugo Barry that has the Booze Cruise.
Yeah.
He's from Bogue. I'm always at awe with him for a young man to be one of the only Black-owned booze cruise vessels, 300 to 400 people. I just wish he can get more work from the Ministry of Tourism or from the folk in the tourism industry, because he's quite a guy. And if I was ever to get into the boating business, he would probably be the only guy that would be my partner.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
You're welcome. Thank you all, Madam Producer.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242.